everyone. I'm Amy Lee Lillard, the creator of Wyrd. And first, I want to thank you for listening to the show, for following, for rating, reviewing, all the things that you're doing. Some of you may know that my first podcast was called Broads and Books, and on that show, my friend Erin and I talked books, pop culture, all sorts of stuff. The show ran from 2019 to 2023, and we stopped then because we had plans for more shows, for bigger challenges, and we created Broads and Books Productions to do that. First up, we created a funny 1980s and 90s pop culture show with our friend and Mariah Carey expert that's certified, Heath Smith. That show's called Fuzzy Memories, and it's available everywhere. And I created this show, Wyrd. It was a natural sort of evolution of a creative project because I also write books. I also write fiction in other forms. And recently, Erin and I reunited for a Broads and Books bonus episode where we talked about that creative work. I wanted to share that conversation here because we talk about Wyrd, writing audio fiction, making podcasts, writing fiction and nonfiction, and so much more. And I thought you might enjoy it. If you're curious about our shows, about my books, about music, anything else, check out the show notes for all the links. And remember that you can always find me and reach out at amyleelillard.com. So thanks again for listening. Here's our bonus episode. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Amy.
How are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm so good.
Why are we talking in this high voice?
I don't know. I think we went
went
like housewives or something.
I know. I don't understand that at all. Maybe just because we're excited because we haven't talked to our Broads and Books listeners in a while.
So long. Hello, friends.
Hi, guys.
We know you all moved over and are listening to Fuzzy Memories.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, we're not sure what you're up to, but
get
on that train.
Yeah.
And
but also, thanks for just keeping subscribed to this thing, even though we're not doing the show anymore, because you're just checking out all the new things we got on offer.
Yes, which is amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And if you have missed anything, Amy has a wonderful audio fiction full series podcast out called Wyrd Women. Women, sorry. Mm-hmm. I always want to include all women in that because we all
should.
Yeah.
I should have named it that.
Yeah, we're just...
Call it woman, women, whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want to do.
WW. That's it. Don't search for it that way. It'll come up with a lot of URLs that you don't want. Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh-huh.
A lot of diet information you don't need.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, but they don't call it that anymore, do they?
No.
They rebranded to something?
I think they rebranded to WW.
Seriously?
And they stopped calling it Weight Watchers, yeah. Because actually, when you think about Weight Watchers, that sounds a little like,
Yeah.
like communist. We're watching your weight.
We are watching you.
Yeah.
And how much you weigh.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what they're doing.
It's 1,000%. But
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. You can check out that. We've got Fuzzy Memories. We got some other great stuff coming this summer from Midwest Wyrd, which is an audio fiction
literary magazine. Yeah.
That is coming out very soon. So
indeed, we're working on the first episodes. We got people submitting stuff. It's fantastic.
It's great. And if you have something to submit, you can find those links on our Broads and Books stuff. Link you right to Midwest Wyrd, and you can submit.
Oh my gosh. We'd love to see it.
We would love to read your stories.
Yeah.
Love it. But today, the real purpose of us coming to you is that if you think back, if you're a Broads and Books listener, you remember that Amy had a book come out not that long ago, honestly.
2021.
Okay, well.
It was long ago.
Yeah, I guess 3 years. But it's not going to seem long ago when I tell you this next fact, which is that you have 2 books coming out basically 2 weeks apart.
That is fact. That is truth.
You have a short story collection coming out called Exile in Guideville that drops May 21st.
That's right.
You also have a memoir coming out from University of Iowa Press that comes out June 5th.
That's right.
I was going to say 3rd, and I knew it was 5th.
Uh-huh.
June 5th. A grotesque animal.
Yes.
So we wanted to just kind of have a book chat today because we don't get to do that all the time.
I love it. First off, we haven't had a book chat on air in a long time.
In a long time.
But also, we don't really, we talk about other books. We
Yeah.
haven't talked about my book.
We haven't talked
I
about
got
your
books.
book.
I
You
got
got
books.
books.
They're in my house. You have read them. You've touched them.
I've touched them.
You touched them all over.
All
Just
over.
got in it. Just got
Everywhere.
deep in it.
Just my fingies all up in there.
Which is exactly what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Fingies in.
So to start, before we get into some of the chat, I wanted you to just maybe give us kind of a brief overview of each of the books.
You bet.
Kind of what it's about.
Yeah. So Exile in Guyville, like you said, is a short story collection. And it's six. Let me try that again. It's.
Thanks, future Amy editor.
It's 6 short stories that are all speculative fiction. By that term, some people call it sci-fi, some people call it, dystopia, all sorts of different words. Basically, it's reality, but it's set just slightly different, slightly askew, perhaps. And again, in my grand tradition, I'm looking at stories of women that are in situations where they might get angry, they might do some bad shit, and we see what happens from there. My other book, A Grotesque Animal, is a memoir, like you said, from University of Iowa Press. And I think we talked about this a little bit on Broads and Books, but a few years ago, at age 43, I found out that I'm autistic. And so I started doing something I'd never really done before, which is write nonfiction. And was writing about this discovery and how it sort of was making me rethink life. That expanded into a whole bunch of stuff about sexuality and class and generational trauma and just kind of everything. And so this memoir brings a lot of that together into a book that tries to uncover why we women are such grotesque animals. Right?
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so we're going to kind of talk about both of them a little bit, and get into it about each. But as you mentioned, I've read both, and I really think when you were talking about Exile in Guyville, you said it was dystopian, maybe could be sci-fi, speculative fiction, and I just feel like almost those genres don't do it justice.
Yeah,
it's just hits so many areas. I think that no matter what your preferred genre of reading is, sometimes we all kind of have something we gravitate to a lot. This is going to hit so many different people in so many different spots. And when you said it was 6 short stories, that kind of blew my mind just now because it felt like more in a good way. Like if they're just so engrossing, and it was a truly wonderful read. I will be surprised if you don't hear from a lot of people that they read both in one sitting, either or, because they're both very compelling and you want to just keep going.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I really think that. I said to Amy that I had to slow down in Exile in Guyville because I felt like I wanted to savor it more. And
yes,
so I
did.
Purposely stopped my pace. But in Grotesque Animal, I did not. And
You just went on.
I just went on.
Yeah, at one point you said, I'm 2/3 of the way in. That was one night.
Yeah.
And now I got to pace myself.
I was like, I got to get all my work done tomorrow super fast so I can finish it because that's all I'm thinking about.
I got to say, too, being a true friend and book friend, both of those categories, you sent me a very long email telling me everything you liked about Exile in Guyville, which was a delightful thing to receive, like on a Tuesday morning, just out of nowhere. It's like, I'll take this. Thank you.
Good.
Yes.
I'm glad that that's the way it was received. And not like,
and also,
creepy fan.
Also, the subject line was in all caps, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit.
The best one I've ever written, subject line. It's phenomenal.
Thank you.
Okay, so when we think about that, you have 2 books coming out so close together.
Yeah.
Completely different genres. How would you say, and you touched on a little bit when you said this is the first time you've kind of written nonfiction.
Yeah.
How did your process differ from genre to genre? Is it a different writing process? Is it similar?
Yeah, it was different and similar at the same time, which is not a helpful answer. I understand that.
Yeah.
However, I think with both kinds of writing, I'm often starting with a phrase, a setting, a situation, a scene, and then sort of going from there. And with each of the short stories, that's how they came about, was, some line that came to me, some character, some situation. With nonfiction, I'd set out to write an essay about discovering autism, about all of this kind of stuff. And a form of that actually exists in the book. It's the one with all the A's.
Yes.
And I kept writing this essay, and I was using the structure as a way to come in to it. But then it kept going and going and going. I was like, this is not, I don't know how to stop this. And then I realized I was writing a book.
Yeah.
And so it was a very different way of coming into it, where it was just like, oh, this is just, it just keeps coming. And suddenly I'm talking about other stuff. I'm talking about how I grew up. I'm talking about, what it's like to be a woman in the world. Like it kept expanding and expanding. And, that sometimes is the case with short stories, but it was a very particular, strange situation with nonfiction.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because we hear so often from writers about how hard it is. And when something flows like that, it tells me that there was so much to say.
There was
such a naturalness to it. That is so evident in the book, that there's a very natural flow, and they're all so interesting in structure, but they all go together so well. So that's interesting to hear. And
it was, like I said, it was this essay that sort of blew up. And then over time, I think one of the ways I have of getting into a work too is that structure, is like, okay, so this A thing is working for a little bit, but I want to talk about sexuality and I want to do it in a different way.
Yeah.
So there's a different format for that. And that's an entryway for me in a lot of ways that also helps it comes so naturally. Like if I find a structure that's working, it just, boom, it flows. And same way with the short stories, if I find something like that,
then it just kind of hits. Okay. So I'm going to piggyback on that for a second. So when you write, because you had another short story collection that came out that we just mentioned in 2021, is there times where you stop a story and come back to it later because it's not flowing? Like you almost have to wait for the thing to hit? Or are there some that you sort of just work through in a different way?
I think more the latter. So like there's a story in Exile in Guyville called Blackbird. And it's set in an internment camp for women in Illinois in the future, obviously. Well, not obviously, I guess. And that was actually, in a slightly different form, a story that I was telling in a novel that never got published. There was a novel where I was working on a number of different timelines and story characters and everything, and I just could not get that novel to come together. I could not figure a way to bring it all out. So I ended up, but I really liked some of those stories, some of those characters, and that one in particular, that future that I was envisioning, I really wanted to make it into something. However, that story, as it was in the novel, it didn't have the race component that came into the final story. And so one day I was like, I want to make this into a story. I had this idea about a race, and then the story just came out of me in like 2 days. So it's like once I figure out a way to tell it in the way that it needs to be told.
Yes.
It sounds so weird when writers start talking about, the character told me how it wanted to be written or whatever, all of that kind of stuff. It's just somehow it worked and things started coming out. So there have been multiple times where I've been writing a character, a story or something in one form. It's not working in that form. Then I bring it into something else and boom, there it is.
Yeah.
And that was one of the cases.
Do you think that there was challenges to each form? Like was there one that seemed easier? Is there one that's more difficult? I'm interested in how that played out, because obviously I would assume you're sort of working on both of these things at the same time or simultaneously. And so I'm interested if you felt like the writing, or maybe not the writing process, but just the level of difficulty, or if you felt a natural flow with one more than the other.
First, a quick note about the timing. I actually wrote Exile in Guyville, the stories of those, probably in 2018, 2019. And I brought them together into a book, I think in 2022. And that's when I submitted to BOA, their fiction prize, and I won that. And that's why this book is coming out. So it's been around for a while.
Interesting.
This nonfiction, I started writing in late 2020, early 2021.
Okay.
And it's just so wild that of those two things, they're coming out at the same time, which is a strange, just publishing, just something weird that happened that way. In terms of challenges, though, it's funny. I realized how much easy we have with fiction after I started writing nonfiction.
Yeah.
Because with fiction, I was just like, shit, I can make this all up. I am a god. This is fantastic.
Right.
Kind of thing,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Even though if things aren't working, I have to figure out a way to solve it, all that, which is indeed a challenge. Absolutely. But with nonfiction, I think there were a couple things that were really challenging. One was my fear of, do I want to tell this story? Do I want to reveal this much of it? Do I want to potentially have someone read this that knows me and doesn't know this particular thing about me? All of those kind of things were really hard to deal with at first. I had to set that aside and just write it for me, which is great because then I was very forthcoming. It was only after I got the book deal, I was like, oh shit, do I want all my business out there? But I stuck with it. Another thing that was kind of tough, and I kind of talk about this in one of the first essays in the book, or first sections in the book, is I heard from a lot of nonfiction writers that you sort of need, just like in fiction, a narrator. You need some sort of narrative distance from the story that you're telling.
Okay.
And I had such a hard time understanding that, which held me back for a while. Because I was like, why would you? Because you're the narrator, I don't understand that. But I figured out why that was a problem to me in that first part. And I write about it there. I basically had to sort of set aside some of that advice that I'd heard, which I think is an important part of writing too, is knowing what to follow and what not to follow.
Absolutely. And
once I did, I realized what I was doing, it was working. And so, whether I was framing it in that way or not.
Yeah. I could see how that could be a roadblock and something that kind of almost prevented the writing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we mentioned too at the beginning that you've been exploring some other forms of writing and creative expression, including the audio fiction that we talked about.
Yeah.
How does that format compare to other formats?
Well, first off, the show, which is not called WW, by the way, don't go looking up for don't fall into a Weight Watchers trap. Don't do
it. No.
It's called Wyrd Woman, and it's 9 episodes of a woman that could potentially be crazy, could potentially just be having this very strange experience of dreams of women from other time and places. I found the process, and this is going to sound kind of like an asshole, but I found it so easy.
Really?
Yes. I think partly because writing in almost a screenplay fashion, at least for this particular story, I didn't have to worry about description. I didn't have to worry about transitions as much. I didn't have to worry about a lot of the things that we worry about. I had to build all that into the dialogue somehow and to get those covered. But I don't know, it felt so exciting to be able to set aside some of the things that we're used to and just focus on almost dialogue in a way, or to focus on stream of consciousness kind of thing and see where that story took me. Yeah, so I wrote those over, I don't know, a series of couple months. I think the harder part then was the sound design, was because obviously we don't have to do that when we're writing, to think about how the audio is going to be shaped, how you're going to use music, how you're going to use sound effects, how you're going to simulate other voices. So that was all a challenge of things that thankfully, because we've been podcasting now for several years, we had some equipment, we had, tools, we had some experience. I've been producing the shows for a long time.
Yes.
So it was a matter of teaching myself a few new skills, but it was so fun. It was really cool to just be creative in that absolutely new way.
Yeah.
And it made me want to do it again. So I'm actually working on another one.
Oh, good. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Did it make you, does that kind of form, doing different forms, inspire you to work on other pieces and other forms too?
Definitely. Yeah. I like, and it's interesting now because when I'm thinking of a new story, I'm thinking, okay, is this a fiction story? Is this an audio story? Is this, a musical story? Is this, what is this story that I'm telling? What's the format that's going to serve it? And it's so cool because now I feel like I can make that happen.
Wow. Yeah.
Just by sort of playing around and experimenting and
That's amazing.
So a lot of fun. And in fact, other writers, if you're listening to this, I found it was such a freeing creative exercise. It might be something you want to look into too, because even if you're not sure about the production part of it, just writing some scripts. That was fun.
Oh, that's interesting that now you kind of have all these formats at your fingertips that you can try something different. Or, I think anyone that writes knows that they have stories that they've worked on that haven't gone anywhere, or they haven't been able to figure out what's wrong with it or missing or whatever. And it could be a format. I mean, it could just simply be format.
Absolutely. And in fact, the next one that I'm working on is an adaptation of a novel that just never went anywhere. It was a novel that I was really proud of the idea and some of the execution, but it just wasn't, presses weren't picking it up, anything like that. And now that I'm sort of adapting it into an audio format, I'm like, oh my God, this may be what it was meant to be all this time, because it's making so much more sense. So much more is coming out of it.
Oh, cool.
That's pretty exciting too.
That's amazing. Okay, so the titles for these two works, if we go back to the books, Exile in Guyville and A Grotesque Animal, are very impactful. How do you go about selecting titles, and are you willing to share any other options that you considered?
Long story short, there were no other options. Those were the only ones.
That's how you know it works. That's how you know it works.
This is it. Yeah. And both of them are named after music. Exile in Guyville was an album by Liz Phair in 1993. And A Grotesque Animal is from the song The Past is a Grotesque Animal of Montreal.
Okay.
That was the original title. University of Iowa Press actually recommended, what if we just called it A Grotesque Animal? And I was like, well, God damn it, that's better.
Dang it. Dang it.
So... And the reason I do that, and also the stories within Exile in Guyville are all named after songs as well. And I think the reason that I do that is music has always been an extremely safe place for me. I think, growing up, just like most kids do, you listen to a lot of pop music and you just listen to what's on and you're sort of, bringing that in, whatever. When I started going to the special school for Smarty Pants kids, we all...
Which is what every school should be named.
We were all little nerds, like exchanging music amongst each other. And it was the first time I really thought, like, music is not just a creative way of expressing yourself, but also us fans. It's a way of us expressing how we feel about the world if we're sharing music, or if we're, like, oh, I love this song. That's saying this about me.
Yes, absolutely.
And after that, music always became that for me. There's a really good quote from Carrie Brownstein, who's a member of Sleater-Kinney. I think I've gone on record multiple times in Broads and Books talking about Carrie Brownstein. And she, in her memoir, Hunger Makes Me a Modern Girl, she talked about seeing the band Bikini Kill for the first time.
Oh.
And it was this really beautiful passage where she was talking about watching this punk concert and watching, these women up on the stage. It gave voice to the turmoil inside her as a teenager. Like, she was feeling all these feelings, feeling all these things, thinking these thoughts, couldn't quite put them into words. And then she heard them, singing these punk songs. And I was like, that's it. That's me.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I've always felt about music.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I feel like books and music are tied together in that way for me. And I kind of want to bring that into the writing experience. Also, it's just fun Easter eggs for people who, love music like I do.
Yeah, that's incredible. That was kind of one of the questions I had, that your writing seems to have strong roots in music. And I was going to ask if there's any specific music you listen to when you're writing, or how does music play into the writing process for you?
Yeah. I can't listen to music with words when I'm writing.
Okay.
Because it'll get in the way.
Yep.
I listen to a lot of film scores. I listen because there's,
that's great.
Because it's instrumental, but it's also dramatic. There's lots of things going on. My all-time favorites, which is no surprise to anyone, is all the film scores that Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross do, who are members of Nine Inch Nails. They have many film scores. They also have a number of just instrumental albums called Ghosts, and those I listen to on repeat when I'm writing, because there's a darkness to them. There's a lightness to them. There's just, it helps me get into a mood and a feeling, when I'm writing. And yeah, that's kind of my go-to.
Interesting. Yeah, I was wondering if you could listen with words, because that's something that's just a roadblock for me in certain situations where I can't have the words, getting in, but that feeling is still there.
Yeah. Well, and even some of our friends talk about, listening to podcasts while they're working, and I I can't even do that. Like even something that I'm not really creating a lot. If I'm just, I can't do any of that.
Yeah.
So it has to be in lanes.
In lanes,
you know?
yeah, absolutely. So that kind of brings me into this next question. Are you exploring any other creative outlets as artistic expression? I mean, we've kind of talked about audio fiction. You know, you're doing different genres of writing. Is there any other way that you're expressing yourself artistically?
Yes. I'm getting into music, which is scary and fun. I sort of taught myself piano a few years ago. Same with guitar a few months ago. And I read an excellent book at the end of last year by Jeff Tweedy, who's the lead singer of Wilco, and who I saw in a Chicago Chipotle, by the way, years ago. So
that's such a funny
mic
place to
drop.
Saw him in a Chipotle.
Saw him in a Chipotle with his family.
Getting one of those burritos.
Did not go up and disrupt his meal. So I'm a hero. Just going to tell you that.
That is a level of self-restraint.
Right?
That's huge.
Anyway, so
you're a goddamn American hero.
Thank you. He wrote a book, which is a fabulous little small book. It's called How to Write One Song. And it's great because it's not like how to be a songwriter or how to make music. It's like, hey, if you're thinking about making a song, just focus on one song. Let's just see if we can do it, kind of thing.
Oh.
But the best part about it is he focused the first several chapters on give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to create, to say that this thing that you're writing is a song, to then try singing it, even if you're not a strong singer, to then try playing instruments around it and see what it can do. And I put that down. I was like, fuck yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. I think what has always held me back is that I'm not a strong singer. I have sort of a unique, deeper voice, which is fine. I can work with it. Most of the music I like is not classically trained musicians.
Right.
It's not, proficiency in it's rock and it's indie and it's punk and it's about some of the rawness and it's about some of the lack of perfection. And once I really put that together, I was like, well, shit, that's exactly the kind of music I would make. So all my rough edges could actually work pretty well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been writing and producing and creating some music and putting it out there. And it's that process of being creative by bringing instruments in and writing lyrics is so crazy, but it's so fun. I can get absolutely lost in it. I feel that like creative flow that you only sort of hear about with, other people. It's such an exciting thing, and I think I'm going to keep doing it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you said you're putting it out there.
Yes.
Can our listeners find it anywhere?
They can. I'm on Spotify. I'm on all the places, and I go by Nuclear Shadow.
One thing as a listener that's heard some of the music, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, is that there is a story almost in each one, and it follows kind of a writing format in that way.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting that you came from that background and then did music, and it's sort of flowing that same way. When I think we think of it the opposite a lot, you know, that like the songs mean things to us because of our own personal stories that we sort of put on it.
Yeah.
And we don't often look at it as like a story in and of itself.
Yeah.
So it's such an interesting place to take the artistic expression, but also almost like a natural place that it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And once I did start doing it, I was like, Jesus Christ, why did I fight this for so long? Like, what was the thing? And I think it was just, a feeling of my lack of, also, I'll be honest, anybody who's seen that Barbie movie where all the guys are singing all the Kens are singing at the Barbies.
Yeah.
I've been in that situation. We've all been in that situation.
We've all been in that
situation. I've had some boyfriends who've tried to teach me guitar, but kind of like, let's try to teach the girlfriend guitar.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible experience. It was always their thing,
Yes.
So I just stayed away from it because fucking patriarchy. That's why.
Well, I was just going to say, that seems like it's interesting to me, that book. That spoke to me just now when you said it, like giving yourself permission to create. Yeah. I feel like sometimes, especially females, need that permission because there's sort of this like, it's okay for a guy to dabble in that and not be great at it, and everyone will still be like, wow,
absolutely,
you play guitar.
Yes.
I mean, again, it's such a trope that it's in a Barbie movie.
Yes.
But we don't have that same thing. It almost feels foreign for us to try and do something like that on our own.
Yeah.
So that's I think a beautiful story, and I almost feel like there's probably going to be something you're going to write in the future about that process. But
I hope so. And because you're absolutely right that there is a gender component to it. It felt immediately like there's going to be more expectations on a woman doing this than if I was just some dude, which there's millions of dudes doing just this, I think especially the voice component, the major musicians among women are, all these very proficient vocalists and singers, but also they're singing about love songs. They're singing about breakups. I'm not interested in any of that. So it was just very weird to try and find a place in there. Also, I think the fact that, I have been such a music nerd for a long time made it easier because I know how songs work. I know how song structures work. I know, without really learning a lot of that, I think that's why some of the writing process and even the creating and playing instruments part came a lot more natural than perhaps they would have.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that that's a new area that, and those two things are feeding each other.
Yes. And in fact, I'm sort of envisioning a new work right now. And I'm like, could I make a musical component of that? Which is such a fun challenge to think about too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we think about sort of your original book that was published, not probably the original book you wrote, but Dig Me Out, published in 2021, how was your experience with the writing, editing, publishing part of that book? Did that influence any of the process that you had with these books? Did you learn any lessons from that you took forward?
Yeah, I think that I learned a couple things. One, that I really like working with small presses. I really like that independence factor. I like that when you work with a small press, they respect your work. They are deferring to you on your work. They're excited to publish you pretty much because they really fell in love with that work as it is,
Right.
And I like that now that I've worked with 3 different presses, it's really interesting to look at how each of them are similar, how each of them are different, the different teams they use. But the thing that's the through line for me is I really enjoy working with them and not having a middle person between us. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people think you have to have an agent to be a writer. I've found that you don't necessarily. I think also, things that I've learned is around promotion and expectations. I think, and maybe this is true for a lot of first-time authors, with that first book, I was like, well, here we go. This is going to change everything. This is going to change my entire life. And in fact, it was just a day. And then
right.
It was just a day, and then I had a book on my shelf, and I did a few fun events, and that was it.
Yeah.
And there was some comfort in that. There was also a little disappointment in that. I don't know what I was expecting.
Yeah.
You just, like I said, you expect it to change your life somehow. And
sure.
Suddenly you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, I'm an author. That's not the case. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I got to feed the cats outside. Yeah. So it's a little different. And so at least I feel a little more comfortable this time around knowing hey, these are going to be great days, but it's not going to change my life. I'm
right.
Chill. And it's also, these are the books right now. There's other stuff I'm working on. There's more in the future. And I'm just going to keep going and keep submitting and keep writing and keep doing all the things and focus on that versus luxuriate in this, final product.
That tells me something about your connectedness to your writing too, because a lot of times you hear from authors like, oh, the book's published, it's out, and now what? Now I have to do something else. And I've heard from you in various times that you've been creating the whole time. You continue to write even when you're in process with these books. A lot of people might say oh, no, I just focusing on getting this one out. But you really still are creating all the time in lots of different formats. And that tells me that you're very connected to your writing voice. You're very connected to getting things out and expressing things, which is, I feel like, the recipe that you need for good writing, for good music making, for all of those things, is to be connected to it and feel like you have something to say.
Yeah, and I think it's taken a while to get there.
Yeah,
I think, and I think you're right that that's not the message that we receive. The message is more about, it's all about the product. It's all about the result, which I'm not going to lie, it's pretty fucking cool that I have books in my hand that I wrote.
Yes,
it's pretty
absolutely,
awesome.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I'm done now. That doesn't mean that I'm, an author. It means that this is something that I wrote and I'm going to keep writing.
Yeah.
And so I'm more of a writer than anything else, you know?
It doesn't seem, at least in the writing, that your expectations or what happened, you know, anything with the first book really influenced you or held you back.
Yeah.
In these books.
And I think part of that was maybe it was, I've thought often that it was very nice that I had a debut book in a very small way. That it was a small experience, you know, the people that read it liked it, but it wasn't like a huge, you know, hardcover book that companies are putting all their money behind, and then there's huge expectations, nothing like that, which I kind of like. I like just working quietly in this world, and if people like it, great, and if they don't, you know, whatever. Yeah.
And I think that comes through in your writing. It doesn't feel like it's being written for anyone. It doesn't feel like it's trying to hit a specific thing. You know, sometimes with the big hardcovers that we see in the airport or we see places, it feels like they're trying to hit certain markets or they're writing to trends. Yeah. As opposed to just writing what they, you know, what they feel, what feels natural to them. And that's very clear in these two, that this is you, this is your writing, this is what you wanted to say. And I think that as a reader of it, you can connect to it on a lot of different levels because it isn't written for a specific. I think when you write to a trend or you write to hit a specific audience, it's a very specific way. Yeah. Like there's enough, it feels so natural to you, but you're also able to take it as the reader and go, wow, yeah, I had an experience like this. Or, you know, this story really speaks to me because that's how I'm feeling right now. Or, you know, there's a lot more expression for the reader to be gained by not feeling like you're being told how to feel, you're being told how to think because we wrote to this specific thing.
That's really nice because I think, yeah, that's what I like most is, you know, you and I have talked before about how, especially when we were young and you find a book or multiple books that feel like they speak to you or they were written for you or you just connect with them really tightly, and how important that was to us in our you know, in our lives and our personalities and like everything. Yeah. And if more than anything, like if someone can find my books in that way, that's everything, you know? And if someday, you know, my books are banned and someone finds them, I feel like that would be the best success.
That would be amazing. I do agree with that. And also just because what we know about banned books is that they get a huge bump in sales.
So ban me.
Yeah.
Ban it.
Do it. Ban away. Okay, well, so knowing that, we kind of talked a little bit about the publishing process there. What advice would you give past Amy or younger Amy about the publishing process now that you've been through it, 3 different presses, kind of 3 different ways? What would be your advice to what Amy thought it was before?
I think to Amy who's unpublished, who's, you know, especially just starting out, a few things. One, watch out for scams because, oh man, there's all sorts of people trying to scam you. Yeah. All sorts of, you know, places that say they're presses, people that say that they're in the industry. You know, it's just everywhere. And when you're a young writer and you don't know a lot of this, it could be very easy to fall into these kind of scams. When you're just young and you're hungry and you're trying, like, that's a really tough place to be. Also, watch out for assholes who think they're experts. I remember being in Chicago trying to write my first novel and, you know, like taking like classes and like workshops and whatever. And usually it was just some dude weighing in about like, well, I wrote this book, so I know how to fix your book kind of thing. Right. But usually that book wasn't published. It was all very suspect. You know what I mean? Yeah. And also like trash that first book that you think is going to get published because it's not good. Yeah. And that's okay. Like you had to write that to be able to get better. And there's going to be more books that you write that won't get published. And that's okay too, because eventually you're going to find your rhythm. You're going to find your voice. And it just takes a while to get there.
It's interesting. I was just thinking when you said that it's really one of the only forms of artistic expression or anything else that we expect perfection right away, right? I mean, if you're looking at like a championship soccer team, you expect that they had practices. You expect that they had games that went horrible. You expect that there were things that they had to learn along the way and learn how to make work. But we don't expect that in writing. We think, oh, if you put the time, like if you sat down and you wrote it, then, somebody wants to read it. Mm-hmm. And that's getting past that, I think, is a big growth point for a writer.
Absolutely. And getting past the idea that if you haven't made it in your early 20s and you haven't got the 30 under 35 or whatever those awards, then, well, you're done.
Yeah.
Because there is sort of I would imagine in a lot of other creative fields too, that they really focus on the young talents that are there, and if you don't make that, then well, shit, you've missed your chance, kind of thing.
That's
a
good point.
Not true, because my books I'm in my 40s and they're coming out.
Yeah, that's incredible. What advice would you give future Amy about the publishing? Is there lessons that you're taking from these 2 books right now and moving forward?
I think I'm hoping that I can continue feeling this joy in creating, mm-hmm. and to keep trying different ways of creating and keep trying new things and not be afraid to try new things and not be afraid to fail. And, hoping that I can keep ignoring the voices that tell me that I'm doing things wrong. Mm-hmm. And those are external voices, those are internal voices. Finding the confidence to just keep creating, even if you're living a different kind of life than other people. To be able to channel some of that into writing and to whatever kind of form of creation. So, yeah, I think to just keep on going, girl. Mm-hmm. You can do it. Hopefully you're past menopause and you're feeling good. Hopefully.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. That's that's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then I have 2 final questions.
Yeah.
First, we kind of talked about a piece of writing advice you got that wasn't serving you. And I think that we all have a laundry list of like the worst writing advice we've gotten, mm-hmm. That led us off the path. Frankly, as humans, we all have advice that we've gotten that we know is bad in every format and way, because everybody likes to tell you that they know how to do it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best piece of writing advice that you've ever been given?
I think it's back to that thing that Jeff Tweedy did, was give yourself permission.
Yeah.
Because, I'd heard that in many ways and forms, but when I was thinking mostly about writing fiction, that idea not just to give yourself permission to try it, but also to give yourself permission to do it in different ways than you've read before or you've tried before. When I had the good luck to be part of an MFA program, and even just that, that sort of validation that I got into that program and I was doing that, it sort of gave me the confidence to be like, well, I'm going to give myself permission to write some weird stuff and see what they think. And that was my way of finding my voice, was giving myself permission to try new things, to get weird, to, to really dig in. And in the program, I was getting the advice to be like, keep doing this, keep giving yourself that permission, keep getting weird, because this is where you're really starting to thrive.
Yeah.
And then, hearing that with music, with podcasts, it's just been great advice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this one is just really for our Broads and Books listeners. And because I know that you guys are probably missing these, but what are some great books you've read this year that you felt like were inspiring? Maybe not that inspiring, I hate that word. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take that back. I don't even know why that came out of me.
We're not hashtag blessed, Erin.
Yeah. So what books have shown you grace?
Oh, God. Gross.
No, yeah, exactly. Gross. What books have struck you this year that you've really loved, that if we were still doing the Broads and Books podcast, you would have definitely brought?
There have been times recently that I've wished we'd been doing this podcast.
Yeah.
One of them just to discuss Baby Reindeer, by the way.
Right?
I know it's not a book, but
yeah, but that's a piece of writing.
Times.
It's still a piece of writing.
Still a piece of writing that just blew my mind in so many ways.
It did me too. That was, wow.
Yeah. But book-wise, I read Sandra Newman's book, Julia, mm-hmm. which is so wild. It's a book set in the world of 1984. So mm-hmm. George Orwell's 1984. And in George Orwell's 1984, it's very manly, right? And we got the main character, Winston Smith. We got Big Brother. It's all dudes. Mm-hmm. And then there's this girl that's sort of, she's part of the plot, but not really part of the plot. And her name is Julia. And this book by Sandra Newman is about Julia. And it is fucking fantastic. The way that she reframes the entire story with Julia in mind, It changes how we feel about the original storyline. It also expands the storyline. It's so good. She in and of herself is just fantastic. I'm just a huge fan now, but that was a huge achievement, I think, that book. And other than that, I've been rereading some stuff.
Nice, yeah.
I reread Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie.
Yeah.
And it's just as weird and delightful as I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Since we haven't had a chance to talk about this.
The obvious thing to say is obviously both your books, because those were both.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you.
I told you that the memoir is one of the best things I've read in a long time.
Gosh,
so definitely those two would be books that I would be bringing. I'm trying to think of some of the. I've been in kind of a nonfiction mode for a little bit. Kind of that kind of same thing, like working on your creative expression and some of that stuff. But one of the fiction books I've read recently, I read The Clinic.
The Clinic. Huh.
Yeah, and it's kind of a straight across, supposed to be kind of a thriller mystery, but it had a lot to say about the world that we're living in now, about how the lengths we're willing to go to be accepted or find popularity, like whether that's through social media, those types of things. It has some things to say about plastic surgery even. The whole premise of the story is that this one of these sisters is she works for a casino and catches people that are cheating at gambling because she's a phenomenal poker player. So she can tell when but she has like a pill problem. She has all these things going on. We're not exactly sure where that all comes from. She finds out that her sister died in a rehab clinic. And she's very confused because everything she knows about her sister is like, I don't know why she would willingly go to a rehab. Like, it doesn't even make sense. And we find out that her sister is actually a famous musician.
Oh.
And so the world is like mourning this loss. And this sister doesn't think that something about this is amiss. So she decides to check herself into the same clinic and sort of go undercover.
Oh, okay.
And it's just about, it is. It's a crazy premise, but what comes out of it is so interesting. The things she learns about herself. I'm a sucker for like a not that sympathetic heroine.
Absolutely.
And she's definitely that. It is a really interesting read and ride. It's sort of a celebrity clinic. So she's in there with a few other quote unquote celebrities. Okay. And that plays an element in it. It was a very interesting story that was just propelling me forward and forward and forward.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
That if you supposedly got into rehab and then disappeared, I would check myself into rehab and investigate the shit out of that.
That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me. So thank you.
I would go down that road and I would be suspicious of everybody.
You would find the culprit.
Find the truth.
I love that. That is.
Can we also talk briefly about the show that's been giving you a little joy?
Yeah.
Do you mind?
No.
Okay, do it.
I'm in love with it.
Okay.
So Mike and I went down a rabbit hole starting watching Botched. And this, if you are unfamiliar, you can find it on Peacock. It actually airs on, I don't know if it's Bravo or E, but it's two plastic surgeons, Dr. Terry Dubrow and Dr. Paul Nassif. They run a plastic surgery. And this is like documentary style, like reality TV style. So this is real. They're not characters. And they help people who have had bad plastic surgery. So every episode is 3 people. There's usually one who had like some very traumatic experience. Like they, busted their nose in a car accident, never healed right. The nose job didn't work, whatever. Like something that someone like legitimately this is affecting their way of life, whether they can't breathe as well or they're very like they've lost their social life because they don't feel comfortable going out. Lots of different examples of that. Then they usually have someone who is like those people that want to look like a celebrity. Ooh. Or there was a gal that wanted to look like a Japanese anime character.
Oh, no.
Right. And so they come in and they're ridiculous and you get to see them sort of counsel them and say like, this isn't something you should be doing to your body. These are the problems, kind of trying to give them help or advice. And then you usually have someone that comes in who had plastic surgery just because they wanted bigger breasts or whatever, and it didn't work. And so usually they can help them fix, kind of the problem. So it's a fascinating show. Sometimes it's really endearing because they help people that get something back that they've been missing. At other times, it's just plain funny. So, I mean...
Can I tell you my idea for reality show?
Yes.
The dynamics of the outdoor cat colony.
Yeah.
Because there is a revolution afoot.
Yeah.
And it's quite the drama out there. I think,
Yeah, you have a situation.
We assign, we give them the names.
Mm-hmm.
I name the cat colony this. By the way, if you forgot this, and how dare you forget this?
Yeah, how dare you?
There's a colony of feral-ish cats outside. And there's been a sort of revolution. Molly Ringwald has led the revolution. And
that feels right.
Yeah, and somehow she's been scaring off the other cats because there's a new dude that's just coming in and trying to steal all the females. This is King Henry VIII. And it's just...
Bad dude.
It's bad dude. And so I've witnessed many cat fights. I've witnessed a lot of just aggressive behavior. And, I mean, there's nothing else to do, really, but put cameras on it.
Yeah.
I could see that going real well.
I could, actually. You could have a really killer YouTube channel.
And then maybe I'd have money to keep supporting these cats.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I like that.
The other thing was maybe we should just talk briefly about Fuzzy Memories.
Oh, yeah.
Because we are doing this other show.
Yeah, we are doing another show.
Yeah, and if you haven't listened to it in a while, you're missing out, my friend.
You are missing out.
Because it's not just us.
No.
It's our delightful, amazing trio partner in crime. These words don't go together. Heath Smith.
Heath Smith. Which it's just been a delight to have him
Absolute
every episode. With the whole premise of Fuzzy Memories is that we're talking about pop culture from the 80s and 90s. So in each episode, you can expect that we each bring 3 things that really stuck out to us from the year we've picked. Mm-hmm. And that could be toys we played with, that could be movies, that could be songs, that could be a million different things. We've gotten into crime, we've gotten into just weird scandals, we've gotten into weird news, but it's all in serving that idea that we all have like fuzzy memories from about things that shaped us or influenced us. It's fun. It's funny.
Yeah.
It is.
I'm going to say we're good at it.
We are good at it.
We're really good at it.
It is good. That didn't sound like the best endorsement after I said it. It's good.
It's real good.
It's real good. I immediately fell back into Bras and Books.
You did.
It's real good. Real good. Remember my rating scale? Real good is top marks.
We also every week get to share our unmitigated gall, something that's been bothering us over the last 2 weeks. And there's all sorts of things that come up. And I don't even know what to tell you. It's just fantastic.
You got to tune in.
Yeah.
So if you are not picking up on that, you should.
That's the takeaway from this. Well, actually, there's multiple takeaways.
No, okay. Don't make that the takeaway. What? No, this is a book. The takeaway is to pre-order the books. Or if you're listening to this, go get them if they're out. Like, that's the takeaway here. Amy wrote 2 books. They're coming out basically 2 weeks apart. Go get them.
I'm not great at promotion. This is great. I know. Yeah, thank you.
She just went down a rabbit hole and said, we're going to promote Fuzzy Memories. And I'm like, we can, but also we're promoting your books. That's what this is.
Also, there's a couple book events.
Yes.
One is a virtual event with the publisher of BOA, which published Exile in Guyville. That's on May 20th. You can find the details at my website, amyleelillard.com. There's also an in-person event, if you're local, in Des Moines, on June 5th at Beaverdale Books.
Yes.
And at that event, Erin will be asking me questions, but also being a bouncer.
Yeah, I have multiple duties. We know that I've been training for that.
Yeah,
so
long time.
Look out for that. Because I'm going to put all those skills to use.
But yeah, you'll get to see both of us if you come to that event.
Absolutely.
We'll be having a discussion like this. It'll be great.
Yeah, it'll be wonderful. And it's so exciting. I'm excited for you. I know Heath's excited for you. I know that everyone is dying to read both of these books.
Do you think the cats are excited for me?
Yeah, I think that's part of the revolution is they're worried.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That makes me feel better.
Mm-hmm. So you got to order them. You got to get out there. Come to the virtual event. Come to the in-person event. But most of all, you need to order the books. I'm just saying. If you're listening to this, we know you like books because otherwise, I don't know why you're here. I mean, our personalities are great, but it's confusing. So
I just watched you try to figure that out in your face. Like, why would they be listening to
I was trying to think of that thing where you didn't like books, and then I would guess you're not at this point in the podcast because all we've done is talk about writing
for
and
4
books.
years, 5 years, just talked about books and
Writing
stuff.
and...
So you've just been real disappointed.
For
5 years.
I mean, you got loyalty. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you like books. Buy the books. I'm not going to promotion either.
We cannot land the plane. Thank you, everyone, for listening.